He was a billionaire whose empire depended on a lost secret. She was a roadside vulcanizer who had every reason to keep it. In a world of greed, Amaka chose honesty, never realizing that the man she helped was the man who would change her world forever. This is the incredible story of how David Okonkwo fell in love with the woman who saved him in his darkest hour. In the heart of Port Harcourt lived a young woman named Amaka. She was just 24 years old, but had the eyes of someone who had seen too much. Every day before the sun fully came out, she tied a scarf over her rough hair, wore her grease-stained overalls, and walked to the dusty roadside tire repair spot down the road. Amaka was not just any worker. She rolled heavy truck tires across the dirt, used a manual iron jack to lift vehicles, and operated a manual air pump without a single complaint. Amaka would sweat under the hot sun, her hands permanently blackened by tire grease, earning money the hard way. Life had never been fair to her. When she was only 12, her parents passed away in a bus crash on their way home from the village. Nobody came to help. No relatives took them in. She was left alone with her two younger siblings, Chidi, who was just 8, and Ifeoma, who had only turned 6. From that moment, Amaka became their mother, their father, and their hope. She sold bread by the roadside at first. Then she washed people's clothes. When that wasn't enough, she begged an old vulcanizer to teach her how to patch tubes and fix rims. And that was how she started working with tires to survive. But no matter how hard things got, she never complained. Sometimes when her arms were aching from wrestling with a heavy rim, she would sit on an old tire, look up at the sky, and whisper, "One day things will change." Little did she know, change was closer than she thought. Not too far away in the same city lived a young billionaire named David. He was 30 years old, tall, calm, and very private. His face was always on magazines. His name was on billboards. He owned 2 big real estate companies, one in Nigeria and the other in the United States. Everyone talked about how rich he was. But there was something people didn't know about David. He didn't like noise. He didn't go to clubs. He didn't trust fake smiles. David was born into wealth, but he was not proud. His mother, a kind woman with soft eyes, always told him, "Respect everyone, no matter how small they look. True wealth is how you treat others." And he listened. Yet, even with all his money, cars, and houses, something was missing. David had never found the right woman to love. Many women came into his life, beautiful, rich, well-dressed, but something always felt wrong. They acted like love, but it smelled like greed. He would always say he wanted a genuine woman, a woman with virtue, not one who loves my pocket, but one who understands pain, one who sees me, not just what I have. But what David didn't know was that that woman was very close. Fate was already writing their story, and very soon their 2 worlds, so different, so far apart, were about to collide. But not in a way anyone could ever expect. After more than 10 years of living and working in the United States, David decided to return to Nigeria. He didn't come back to show off. He came back for vacation. He wanted 2 quiet months to rest, check on some of the land he owned in different parts of the city, and enjoy simple moments. In the morning, David woke up feeling light. He decided to go shopping and also inspect one of his properties. He wore a plain green t-shirt, jeans, and a face cap. No suit, no flashy cars, just him and one of his regular black SUVs. "I just want to breathe today," he said as he picked up his car keys. He drove himself to a nearby supermarket, not far from the land he planned to inspect. Inside the supermarket, David picked a few snacks, drinks, toothpaste, and other important items. He smiled at the cashier, paid for everything, and carefully slipped his black wallet into his back pocket. But as he walked toward his car, something fell. He didn't notice. It was his wallet. That wallet held everything: his US driver's license, 2 foreign credit cards, his Nigerian ID, business cards, and over $2,000 in cash. When he got into his car, he felt so calm. He even opened a bottle of water and drank slowly before starting the engine. He had no idea what he had just lost. It was about to be shaken. That same morning, Amaka was walking to the tire repair spot, but she had woken up feeling a bit hungry, so she decided to pass by the supermarket to get a soft drink and snacks. She counted the money in her bag twice to be sure it was enough. After buying what she needed, she stepped out of the supermarket quietly, but something caught her eye near the vehicle parking area of the supermarket. A black wallet. She paused. She looked around. Nobody seemed to be searching for anything. She stepped closer, bent down slowly, and picked it up. It felt heavy. She looked inside and saw a lot of foreign money, business cards, and some documents. Amaka's eyes widened. "Ah, who left his wallet here?" she said softly. She took a step back, opened the wallet properly, and saw business cards. She picked one and tried to read the number, but it had an international code. There was no WhatsApp contact, and no Nigerian number was listed. She tried to call the foreign number, but it wasn't connecting. For a moment, she looked around again. Nobody had returned to look for anything. She could have walked away. No one would have known, but something in her heart said no. She walked back into the supermarket and went straight to the cashier. "Excuse me," she said. "I found this wallet outside around the parking area. I think it might have fallen out of someone's pocket." The cashier looked surprised. "You mean someone lost this kind of wallet?" the cashier said. Amaka nodded. "Yes, please give it to security. When the owner comes, please return it to him." The cashier stared at her. "You're a nice person, thank you." She handed the wallet over to the cashier and walked out. At the petrol station not far from the supermarket, David pulled over and got out of his car. The attendant walked up to him with a smile. "Good morning, sir. Is it full tank?" the young man asked. "Yes, please," David said. "Are you paying with debit card or cash?" the attendant asked. "Debit card," David said. "So," the attendant continued, "if you're paying with a debit card, I'd prefer you make the payment first, because we usually encounter network downtime sometimes." Then David replied, "Sure, that's okay." Then David reached into his back pocket, where he always kept his wallet, but it was empty. He paused. Then he checked his other pocket. Nothing. He opened the car door and searched the front seat under the dashboard between the chairs. Still nothing. He moved to the back seat and looked through his bag, his file folder. Still nothing. His heart started beating fast. "My wallet," he said under his breath, his face slowly changing. "Where's my wallet?" He looked at the pump attendant. "Please give me 1 minute." David jumped into the driver's seat and drove off it immediately. As he drove back toward the supermarket, he whispered to himself, "Please God, let it be there. Let me find my wallet there." That wallet had everything: important business cards, his US driver's license, and other important ID cards. Minutes later, he pulled into the supermarket and stepped out fast. He walked straight to the cashier at the counter and said, "Excuse me, please. I was here about an hour ago. I think I lost my wallet. Did anyone see it?" The cashier looked at him closely. "You're the man who bought snacks, right?" "Yes, that's me," David said, trying to stay calm. The cashier nodded. "Yes, a young lady found a wallet just minutes after you left. She returned it to our head of security." David sighed in deep relief. "Thank God. Can I speak with him?" "Let me call him," the cashier said. "I'll be right back." She stepped out of the store and walked down Mr. Emeka. "Good evening, sir," the man greeted. "Good evening," David replied. "I lost my wallet this morning. I was here to buy some items. The cashier just told me someone found a wallet and gave it to you." The man nodded. "Yes, sir. A young lady dropped a wallet here not too long ago. But do you have proof that it belongs to you?" "Yes," David said quickly. "My business cards are inside. My name is David Okonkwo. You will also see a passport photograph." The security officer opened the small drawer beside the counter and brought out the black wallet. He opened it and saw the business cards and the photo. He looked back at David. "You're correct. This is yours." He handed the wallet over. David opened it slowly, one side at a time. Everything was still there: the cash, the documents, the cards. Nothing was missing. He held the wallet tightly and turned to both of them. "Where is the lady?" "The one who returned this." The cashier smiled. She didn't say much. She only came to buy snacks and a soft drink. She saw the wallet outside and brought it in. David blinked. She didn't leave a number. "No, sir," the cashier replied. "She didn't even wait for a thank you." David paused, then requested for a small piece of paper and pen. He wrote down his phone number carefully. He folded the paper and gave it to the cashier. "Please," he said, "if she ever comes back here, give her this. Tell her to call me." "Okay, sir." The cashier nodded. David then reached into his wallet, pulled out some Naira notes, and handed them to both the cashier and the security guard. "Thank you," he said, "not just for keeping it safe, but for being part of something honest." They both thanked him with big smiles. But as David walked back to his car, he looked around the premises, hoping to see the lady who was so kind and honest enough to return his wallet. She was gone, but something in his heart told him this wasn't the last time they would meet. That night, David lay wide awake in his large bedroom. The lights were off, but his eyes were open. He turned from side to side, but sleep refused to come. His thoughts kept going back to the kind young woman at the supermarket, the one who returned his wallet without taking a single thing. He placed his hand on his chest and stared at the ceiling. "Wow, she has proven that there are still honest people out there," he whispered to himself. She saw that money and she didn't touch it. He sat up on his bed and shook his head slowly. "I don't even know her name," he said softly. "I wish she had left a number. I wish I could thank her myself. I hope she comes back," he said. "She truly deserves to be rewarded. People like her are rare, so rare." 3 weeks later, Amaka returned to the same supermarket. She had finally saved a little money and wanted to buy some groceries for herself and her younger siblings, Chidi and Ifeoma. As Amaka pushed a shopping trolley through the entrance, she looked tired but focused. She didn't notice the cashier by the counter waving at her. "Excuse me, Ma," the cashier called. Amaka kept walking. "Ma, excuse me," still no answer. But then someone tapped Amaka's arm and whispered, "Hello, the cashier is calling you." Amaka turned back slowly. The cashier quickly came forward with a small smile. "Good afternoon, Ma," she said kindly. "I'm sorry for disturbing you, but someone asked me to give you this." She handed over a folded piece of paper. Amaka blinked in surprise. "Who gave you this?" she asked. The cashier's smile grew. "The man whose wallet you returned weeks ago. He said, if you ever came back, I should give this to you." Amaka froze, her fingers tightened slightly on the paper. She looked down at it. There was a phone number written on the paper. Her heart beat faster. She didn't expect anything, not after 3 weeks had passed. She had forgotten about it even. "Oh, okay, thank you," she said softly. The cashier nodded. "He seemed very serious about wanting to thank you," cashier said. Amaka folded the paper and held it in her hand as she continued shopping, but her mind was no longer fully in the store. She kept thinking about the paper and what it could mean. On her way home, she carefully put the paper inside her shopping bag. When she got back to their small apartment, she dropped the bag in the corner and went straight to the kitchen. Later that evening, when Ifeoma, Amaka's younger sister, had unpacked the items Amaka bought from the supermarket and was cleaning the house, she gathered the used paper bags that Amaka had returned with from the supermarket and disposed of them in the waste bin outside the house. She had no idea that there was a phone number inside the paper bags. And by the time Amaka remembered, it was already too late. The next morning, Amaka woke up feeling light in her heart. Then her mind went back to the paper the cashier gave her, the one with David's phone number. She smiled softly. "Today I'll call him." Later that day, when Amaka was ready to call him, she opened her handbag to search for the phone number. Then she paused. She suddenly remembered she had placed the piece of paper inside the shopping bag she brought back from the supermarket. She quickly called out, "Ifeoma." Ifeoma answered from outside the house. When she came in, Amaka said, "Please help me check for the paper. Bag I came back with yesterday. There's a small piece of paper inside." Ifeoma froze for a moment, then replied, "Is it something important?" "Because I already threw it away yesterday." Amaka's eyes widened. Oh no. Without thinking, she ran out barefoot across the street, straight to the big green waste bin by the corner. She didn't care who was watching. She reached the bin, opened the lid, but it was empty. Completely empty. The trash collector had already come. Amaka stood there, frozen. Her heart sank. She looked down at the empty bin and felt something tighten in her chest. Her hands dropped by her sides, her legs felt weak. She slowly sat on the pavement beside the bin. She stared at the ground and whispered, "God, why now? How could this happen?" Tears rolled down her cheeks, quiet and steady, but after a few minutes she wiped her face with the edge of her dress. She stood up and said softly to herself, "If this is meant to be, it will still happen." She thought about going back to the supermarket to tell the cashier, maybe ask for the number again. But just as she turned to go, she stopped. She didn't want to look desperate, so she took a deep breath and walked slowly back home. But deep inside her heart, something still hoped. 2 weeks passed, life went on. Amaka went back to work at the tire repair spot, waking up early, coming home late as usual. Then one Saturday morning, her neighbor knocked on the door. Amaka, the woman said, "There's a free outreach at the local government secretariat. They're giving out food, books, and even free beverages. It's from one big real estate company. You should go with your siblings." "I'll be there too," Amaka nodded. "Let's go." When they got to the event, the place was full but peaceful. People stood in line. Volunteers gave out bottled water, beverages, and packs of rice. Amaka was given a small pack of rice and some tomato paste. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. By the refreshment table, a lady was helping to serve juice. Her face looked familiar. Amaka looked again. It was the cashier from the supermarket. The lady looked up, squinted, then smiled brightly. "Are you? You're the one who returned the wallet, right?" Amaka smiled. "Too. Yes, Ma, I'm the one. But I lost the number you gave me." The lady's smile grew wider. She leaned close and whispered, "The man is here. He's the one sponsoring this whole event." Amaka's heart jumped. She froze. Her eyes slowly scanned the crowd. Was this the moment she had been waiting for? The cashier looked around for a moment, then gently pointed toward a black SUV parked quietly at the corner of the field. "That's him," she said, smiling. "He's the man sitting inside that SUV. Let me go and tell him you're here." Amaka's eyes widened. She quickly shook her head. No, please, there's no need for that," she said softly. "I didn't come here for that." But the cashier had already turned and was walking towards the SUV with a wide smile on her face. Amaka stood there frozen. Her heart was beating fast. She felt her hands sweating. Just a few seconds later, she saw the cashier walk up to the car, bend slightly, and speak to the man inside, pointing toward Amaka. Then the man stepped out. It was David. He looked toward where the cashier was pointing. Then his eyes met Amaka's. He walked toward her slowly, and when he reached her, he stopped and smiled gently. "I finally met you," he said in a calm voice. Amaka smiled back shyly. "Good afternoon, sir." "What's your name?" David asked. "I'm Amaka," she said, her voice soft but clear. David nodded and smiled again, shaking his head slowly. "You have no idea how long I've been trying to find you," he said. Amaka looked at the ground, then replied, "I lost the number the cashier gave me. I kept it in a bag, but my siblings threw it away." David smiled lightly. "I'm sorry about that, but maybe today wasn't a mistake. Maybe we were meant to meet here." He looked at her kindly. "How did you hear about this event?" Amaka replied, "A neighbor told me, so I decided to come." "That's nice. I'm really glad you came." Then he brought out his phone and held it out to her. "Please type your number here," he said. Amaka took the phone with both hands and carefully typed in her number. Then he gave her a missed call right away so she could save it. "Please call me when you get home," David said gently. Amaka smiled brightly. "Okay, sir," she replied, her voice full of joy. Before leaving, David reached into his car and brought out a small brown envelope. He handed it to her quietly. "Just a little something," he said. "Use it for your groceries." Amaka's eyes filled with gratitude. She held the envelope close to her chest. "Thank you, sir. God bless you," she said. David smiled again, nodded, then turned back toward the group of organizers nearby. Amaka turned and began to walk toward the main road. She got to the bus stop, waited for a few minutes, then a small yellow bus going to her area arrived. As Amaka got into the bus, she squeezed into a small space near the back. The bus was already full, and the noise of traffic filled the air. She sat down quickly, placing her handbag on her lap. A few minutes into the ride, the bus began to slow down. They had reached her bus stop. Amaka hurriedly opened her handbag to bring out money to pay the driver, but right on top of the money was her phone. Without thinking, she lifted the phone and placed it gently on her lap so she could reach the cash underneath. The driver then shouted, "Madam, where's the money? Please step down, you're delaying me." Amaka grabbed the money, handed it over, and then quickly picked up her bag and the pack of rice she got from the event. In the pressure to get off before the bus moved again, she forgot the one thing she had placed on her lap, her phone. She stood up fast, stepped off the bus, and joined the crowd on the sidewalk. The bus door closed behind her and the driver pulled away. Inside the moving bus, Amaka's phone quietly rolled from the seat to the floor unnoticed. She had no idea what she had just left behind. Not yet. When she got home, she opened her bag to bring out her phone. She wanted to call David and say thank you again, but the phone was gone. That was when she remembered the phone had been on her lap and she had stood up too quickly. Amaka sat on the floor. Her eyes were red, but she held back her tears. She closed her eyes and whispered with a quiet voice, "God, you are faithful." Even with the pain in her heart, she still believed. Later that night, David sat in his living room. His heart was full of excitement. He smiled to himself as he remembered Amaka's quiet smile, her soft voice, and how her eyes lit up when he gave her the envelope. He wanted to hear her voice again. He picked up his phone and dialed the number she had typed in earlier, but it didn't ring. It went straight to a voice message.
The number you have dialed is switched off.
This number is switched off.
Please try again later.
He paused. Then he tried again. Still off. Maybe her phone battery is low, he said to himself. Or maybe she turned it off to rest. He waited for about 30 minutes and tried again. Still off. David leaned back on the couch. A strange feeling began to sit in his chest. "Why is the phone still off?" he whispered. By the next morning he was restless. He dressed up quietly, got into his car, and drove back to the same supermarket. When he got there, he walked straight to the cashier. "Good morning," he greeted. The lady looked up and smiled. "Good morning, sir." "Please," David said, "do you by any chance know where that young lady lives?" "The one who returned my wallet." "Amaka." The cashier paused, then shook her head. "No, sir. She never told us where she stays. She only came to shop and left." David's shoulders dropped a little. He nodded slowly and forced a smile. "All right, thank you." As he walked back to his car, his mind was full of questions. Did she block me? Did something happen to her? He didn't know what to think. He sat inside his car for a few minutes, silent, staring through the windshield. Then he started the engine and drove back home. 2 days later, David decided to visit a relative. He thought it might help him clear his mind. While driving along a quiet street, not too far from the outskirts of town, something caught David's eye. An elderly woman was sitting beside a small wooden stall. Her head leaned against the dusty wall, her legs stretched out on the floor. A few bananas sat on the table. At first glance, she looked like someone he had seen before. He slowed down a little, eyes still on her as he drove closer. His eyes locked on her face, his chest tightened. He looked again, now more certain. "Yes, that's her," he whispered. David gently pulled over by the side of the road, turned off the engine, and stepped out quietly. He walked over slowly, watching her closely, then his heart skipped. He knew her. David stepped closer and called out gently, "Mummy." The old woman woke up quickly. She looked frightened. She was David's childhood nanny. "Please, who are you?" she asked, her voice weak. David smiled softly. "It's me, David, the son of Mr. Okonkwo, the husband of Mrs. Ngozi." The woman's eyes widened. She stood still for a moment, searching his face. Then she covered her mouth with both hands. "Mr. Okonkwo?" she asked. "Your father is Mr. Okonkwo. And your mother, Ngozi?" David nodded. "Yes, Ma." The woman gave a small cry of joy and hugged him tightly. "My son," she said, "you've grown so much. I used to carry you on my back. I worked for your parents many years ago." "Ah, God is wonderful." David smiled and held her hands. "Mummy, what are you doing here? Why are you sleeping outside?" The old woman sighed and looked away. "It's a long story, my son." David didn't need to hear more. He gently held her arm. "Come, let me take you home." Without hesitation, she followed him. He helped her into his car, and they drove off quietly. When they got to his house, he gave her a warm room to sleep in, fresh clothes and food. The next morning, David walked into her room and greeted her with a smile. "Good morning, Mummy," he said. The old woman sat up slowly and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Good morning, my son," she replied. David quickly came closer and used a handkerchief to wipe her tears, but her voice broke as she spoke. "My son, God will bless you. You don't know what you've done. You've taken me away from shame and begging." Those words cut deep. David looked at her and said in a calm voice, firm voice, "You will never beg again." and he meant it with all his heart. Then David led the old woman to the sitting room. He gave her a warm tea and then sat across from her and asked gently, "Mummy, why were you lying by the roadside? What really happened?" The old woman sighed deeply. Her eyes looked far away, like she was seeing old memories. "My son," she began slowly, "after your daddy and mummy relocated to the USA, they gave me some money. I was so happy. I used it to start a small business. I began selling food items in a local market. I also rented a small apartment." David listened quietly, nodding as she spoke. "Things were going fine at first," she continued, "but years later the business started going down. Food prices went up. People were not buying like before. My goods began to spoil. Sometimes I stayed in the market the whole day without selling much." Her voice became weaker. "One day my landlord asked for rent. I begged him to give me time, but he refused. A few weeks later he came with 2 men and threw my things outside." David's eyes widened. "He did what?" The old woman nodded sadly. "Yes, my son. I packed the little I had and moved into my small shop. That was the only roof I had left. I slept there every night." She paused. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Then one night around midnight, I was sleeping on the floor of the shop. Suddenly, 5 men broke in. They kicked the door open. I tried to scream, but one of them pointed a gun at me. They stole every money I had made that month. They took my phone and the most expensive of the food items." David was already leaning forward, both hands tightly folded. She continued, "The next month, the owner of the shop came and said, 'If you don't pay rent, leave.' I cried. I begged her, but she locked the shop and sent me out." Tears slowly rolled down David's cheeks. He covered his mouth and looked away, trying to stay strong. "Mummy," he whispered, "all this happened to you?" The old woman nodded. Her lips trembled. The pain in David's heart was heavy. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. All he could do was sit there and stare into the air. After the long, painful talk with the old woman, David went into his study and sat quietly for a few minutes. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number. It was his site engineer. "Hello, sir," the engineer answered. "Good morning," David said calmly. "I have a special job for you." "I am listening, sir." "I want you to build a 4-bedroom house," David said. "Make it simple but solid. It must be ready within 2 months. 2 months, the engineer repeated. "Yes," David said. "It's for someone very special. She's moving in once it's done." The engineer paused, then replied, "All right, sir. Consider it done." Construction began the next week. Brick by brick, the house started rising. It was located not too far from the quiet part of GRA, peaceful and safe. Weeks passed, and one sunny afternoon, David decided to visit the area where Amaka worked. He wanted to see her in her own world. He arrived in his black SUV, stepped out slowly, and looked around the dusty roadside. As David walked closer to the tire repair spot, something caught his eye. A young woman wearing a greasy scarf and a t-shirt stained with oil was wrestling with a massive truck tire. She was using a heavy iron bar to pry the tire away from the rim, her muscles straining, her face covered in sweat and grime. She was focused, not looking anywhere else. But her face looked familiar. David paused. His heart beat a little faster. He squinted his eyes and whispered to himself, "Wait, could that be her?" He took a step forward, then another. The lady finally managed to pry the tire loose, gasping for breath. David called softly, "Amaka." The lady froze. She turned slowly and her eyes met his. "Sir," she said, her voice almost breaking. "You again?" They stood there, both surprised, both confused, both full of questions. David took a step closer and looked her straight in the eyes. "You know," he began quietly, "the day I was told that a young lady found my wallet filled with foreign currency and returned it even when she had every chance to take it. I was stunned." Amaka said nothing. Her eyes stayed fixed on him. David continued, "I planned a befitting reward for you. I even waited for your call. But now seeing you here wrestling with truck tires under the hot sun, doing a job that even many men avoid, and still knowing that you returned that wallet without touching the money," he paused, shaking his head slowly in disbelief. "It makes me even more intrigued." Then, in a calm but firm voice, he said, "Right now, I need you to drop that tire bar and come with me." Amaka's fingers tightened around the iron bar. She looked up at him, silent, unsure what is the plan David had prepared for her. And now that he has seen her true struggles, what will he do next? Will this very moment be the beginning of their love story? Amaka stood still for a moment. Then slowly she bent down and dropped the iron bar she was carrying. She wiped the grease from her face with the back of her hand, dusted off her overalls, and looked up at David. He was still watching her closely. "Come with me," he said softly. Amaka looked down at her stained clothes and then back up, feeling unsure. "I'm not dressed properly," she said quietly. David smiled warmly. "You're perfect just the way you are." Without saying another word, he led her to his car. They drove through the busy roads of Port Harcourt until they stopped in front of a small boutique that sells both men's and women's clothes. The store looked neat and quiet, with clean glass doors and pretty clothes displayed inside. David opened the door for her and said, "Pick nice clothes." Amaka froze. Her eyes moved from one price tag to another. Everything looked too shiny, too expensive. "Sir, I can't," she said. "These clothes are too expensive." David spoke gently. "This isn't to impress you. I just want you to feel seen. You helped me. Let me help you too. Go ahead and pick the clothes that you like." Amaka stayed quiet for a few seconds, then she nodded slowly. She walked around the store and quietly picked some beautiful dresses and nice-looking shoes. The shopkeeper, a young lady with short curly hair, watched her with kind eyes. After shopping, David drove her to a quiet restaurant. The place had soft lights, wooden chairs, and a slow ceiling fan spinning above their heads. Soft music played in the background. They sat near a window away from the crowd. Amaka sat across from David, still unsure how to feel, but for the first time in a long while she felt safe. As they waited for their food, David looked at her and asked, "May I know more about you?" Amaka looked at her hands for a moment, then slowly began to speak. "I lost my parents in a car crash when I was 12 years old," she said. David's smile faded. He sat still, listening closely. "At that age, I became both the mother and father to my two siblings up until they grew up," she continued. David asked quietly, "So, tire repair is how you've survived all these years?" Amaka nodded. "Well, I've done a couple of other menial jobs like housekeeping and street hawking before I finally learned to be a vulcanizer." David leaned forward a little and looked straight into her eyes. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met," he said softly. Amaka looked down and gave a shy smile. "I'm just doing my best," she replied. For a moment they sat in silence, but in that quiet space something began to grow between them. Something gentle, something real. That night David could not sleep, but this time it wasn't worry. It was something deeper. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Amaka had shared with him. Her story stayed in his heart. The way she lost her parents, the way she worked day and night just to care for her younger siblings. He sat up, ran his hand across his forehead, and whispered to himself, "How can someone go through so much and still be this strong?" By morning, he had made up his mind. He picked up his phone and called his personal assistant. "I need you to find out where Amaka lives," he said. "Everything. I want to pay her a surprised visit." "Yes, sir," the assistant replied. Few days later, the assistant returned with details. She lives in a small apartment in a part of the city where houses are affordable, together with her two siblings who are about the age of 20 and 18. Nothing fancy, just one small room with a shared bathroom. She often pays her rent late, he said. David closed his eyes. His chest felt tight. He then requested for Amaka's address from his PA. That evening, he dressed down in a plain shirt and drove to the area where Amaka lived. But he didn't park close to her street. Instead, he parked a distance away and walked. He wanted to see things for himself. As he got closer to the compound, he stopped. There, by a small tap in front of the building, was Amaka. She was sitting beside a plastic bowl, washing clothes. Soap bubbles floated in the air. It was simple. It was pure. David took a deep breath. Then he called out softly. "Amaka," she looked up, eyes wide. Shock filled her face. "Sir," she said, standing up quickly, "you came here. How did you find my house?" David smiled and walked closer. "I asked a few questions and followed the answers," he said gently. "I wanted to surprise you. That's why I didn't call you to get your address." I just wanted to see where the angel who helped me lives. Amaka let out a shy smile. Please take a seat, she said quietly as she cleaned a low wooden bench in front of the house. David sat down as Amaka wiped her hands and went into the room to prepare something. Later she came out with a small tray, a plate of noodles cooked with fried eggs. David ate like he hadn't tasted food in days. This is good, he said, smiling between bites. Amaka smiled softly. Make do with it, sir. It's what I really have now. Okay, I'm enjoying it, David replied. As they sat together in that compound, something began to grow in the silence. David looked at her gently and said, Amaka, I don't just like your character. He paused for a moment, then added, I admire your heart. Amaka looked at him, and in that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them. Something real, something deep, something that was just beginning. Over the next few days, David's mind was made up. He had seen enough. Each time he remembered Amaka sitting by that tap, washing clothes with her bare hands. Something in his heart shifted. She deserved more. Her siblings deserved better. He began making quiet arrangements without telling her. First, he contacted a trusted real estate agent and secured a well-built, fully furnished two-bedroom apartment in a quiet, secure estate. It wasn't overly lavish, but it was comfortable, peaceful, and dignified. A few days later, David drove to Amaka's place with a gentle smile on his face and a plan in his heart. Where are we going? Amaka asked as she stepped into the front seat beside him. David smiled but said nothing. You'll see, he said calmly, starting the car. They drove in silence for a while until David finally turned into a beautiful estate, with lush trees, painted fences, and uniformed security at the gate. Amaka looked around confused when he parked the car in front of a modern cream-colored building with a small garden in front. She turned to him, eyes wide. Sir, what are we doing here? David stepped out of the car, walked to her side, and opened the door for her. Amaka, he said, this is your new home. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a shiny bunch of keys. Amaka froze. My what? David smiled. I got this apartment for you and your siblings. Fully paid, fully furnished. You won't have to worry about rent. It is for you. Tears welled up in Amaka's eyes. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't find the words. She sank to her knees right there on the tiled pavement and wept silent, grateful tears. David knelt beside her and gently held her shoulders. You didn't just return my wallet, Amaka. You returned my faith in people. She looked at him through tear-filled eyes. Why are you doing all this for me? David looked at her, his voice calm and steady. Because you deserve it. Because good people like you shouldn't suffer alone. And just like that, Amaka's life began to change quietly, beautifully, and with dignity. Weeks passed. David and Amaka kept talking. No pressure, no pretending. Their connection grew stronger each day. Sometimes they sat for hours just talking about life, family, and dreams. It was simple, but it felt right. One Saturday morning, David woke up early. He sat on his bed for a moment, thinking deeply, then smiled. He stood up, walked to the guest room, where the old woman who was his nanny had been staying since he took her from the street, and knocked gently on the door. Mummy, he called softly. Please dress up. There's somewhere I want to take you. The old woman's voice came from inside, calm and warm. Okay, my son, just give me a few minutes. She sounded curious. While she got ready, David picked up his phone and called Amaka. Hello, Amaka, he said. Yes, sir. Good morning, she replied. Please, can you meet me at the tire shop? The one where we met, he asked gently. Amaka didn't ask questions, she just smiled. Okay, sir, I'll be on my way now, she replied. David ended the call and turned to the door. The old woman was already dressed in her simple lace wrapper and wearing the nice slippers David had brought for her. She stood in front of the room holding her small black handbag. David smiled. You look beautiful, Mummy. Let's go. She chuckled lightly. You haven't told me where we're going, my son, she said, looking curious. David just smiled again. Don't worry, Mummy. You'll see soon. They drove for about an hour and stopped in front of a quiet house in a new area. It was a freshly painted 3-bedroom bungalow. The walls were white and brown. The small flowers outside danced in the breeze. A big red ribbon was tied around the front door. Amaka was already there, waiting for David. She stood at a corner, looking surprised but smiling. David stepped out of the car and opened the door for the old woman. "Come," he said gently. She stepped out slowly, looking around. David walked to the front of the house, holding a small key in his hand. He turned to the old woman and said, "This is your house now. No more rent. No more sleeping outside. No more tears." The old woman looked at him confused. "David, what are you saying?" David smiled and placed the key in her palm. "You deserve this and more," he said. The old woman looked at the key in her hand, then at the house. She dropped to her knees on the ground. "Thank you, God," she cried. "Thank you, my son. May God bless you. May you never lack. May your own children never suffer." David rushed to her and helped her up on her feet. "Don't do that, Mummy." He said, "You were my nanny when I was a child. You took care of me when my parents were busy with their careers, and now it's my turn to care for you." Amaka had tears in her eyes. She quickly blinked, trying not to cry. She looked at David and said softly, "You're a very good man. May the Almighty God continue to bless you." David turned to her and smiled. "Sometimes the true test of wealth is how much light you bring into someone else's dark moment," he said. As they all stepped into the house David had built for the old woman, her hands flew to her mouth in surprise. "Is this really mine?" she asked, her voice shaky. David smiled and nodded. "Yes, Mummy, this is your home now. No more roadside sleeping, no more hunger." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She held Amaka's hand tightly. "My daughter, please thank him for helping this helpless old woman." Amaka smiled warmly. "You deserve this, Mummy. You've been through enough." They all sat down in the living room. The air smelled fresh. Everything was new. Then David stood up and reached into a small bag he had carried in. "Mommy," he said, handing her a thick bundle of money, "this is for your upkeep. From now on, I'll place you on monthly support. You won't need to work again." The woman covered her mouth again, shaking her head, and David continued, "I'll also get you a housekeeper to handle all the house chores. You'll just relax and enjoy peace." "Ah, my God will bless you, my son," she said, crying. "You will never lack." Amaka's eyes glowed with happiness. She looked at David with admiration, but then something happened. David turned slowly toward Amaka. He reached into his coat pocket and brought out a small red box. Amaka blinked. The old woman gasped. David stepped closer and dropped to one knee. "You came into my life in greasy overalls," he said quietly, but with a clean and honest heart. Amaka's smile faded slightly, her eyes now searching his. "I didn't expect to meet someone like you," he continued. "You didn't ask for anything. You gave more than most would. And every time I look at you, I see strength and peace." She swallowed hard, her heart beating fast, her eyes widened. She wasn't expecting this. Not here, not now. She looked at the old woman. The woman nodded, smiling through her tears. Amaka looked back at David and whispered, "Yes." David smiled deeply as he slipped the ring on her finger. The old woman raised her hands and said joyfully, "May God bless your home, my children." The three of them hugged tightly, a picture of joy, love, and answered prayers. After the engagement, David and Amaka started going out more often. They visited new places, ate together, and laughed like best friends. They looked happy. People around them could feel the love they shared. One evening, as they sat in the garden, watching the sun go down, David held Amaka's hand. "My love," he said softly, "I think it's time." Amaka looked at him. "Time for what?" David smiled. "To tell my parents I want them to meet you." Amaka's eyes widened a little. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "They're in the US, but they've been asking me to settle down, especially my mom. She's been praying for this moment." That same night, David called his parents. "Daddy, Mummy, I have something to tell you," he began. "What is it, son?" his father, Mr. Okonkwo, asked. David smiled. "I'm engaged." There was a short silence. Then his mother's voice jumped through the phone. "What? Are you serious, my son?" David laughed. "Yes, Mummy, and I want you to meet her. She's sitting right here." He passed the phone to Amaka. Amaka held the phone gently and said, "Good evening, Ma." "Ah, my dear, good evening," David's mother shouted joyfully. "I've heard so much about you. My son sounds different. Happy. You must be special." Amaka smiled. "Thank you, Ma. I'm really happy too." "I can't wait to meet you," David's mum said. "Me too, Ma," Amaka replied softly. A few months later, a date was picked for the wedding. Everything was moving fast. Invitations were printed, clothes were sewn, food was planned. Then, just 1 week before the wedding, David and Amaka drove to the airport to welcome his parents. They waited at the arrival gate, hearts beating fast. Then they saw them. Mr. Okonkwo and his wife walking out slowly, pulling their bags. David waved. Amaka stood beside him, smiling, her heart full of joy. David's mother stopped and grabbed her husband's arm. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering her mouth. "She's so beautiful. She looks even better than what we saw over the video calls." Mr. Okonkwo smiled and nodded. David and Amaka rushed forward. "Mummy, Daddy?" David called. They hugged tightly. His mother held Amaka's hands and looked into her eyes. "You are even more beautiful in person, my dear," she said. Amaka blushed. "Thank you, Ma. I can see why my son is so happy," she added. They all got into the car and headed home. As they arrived, the old woman who had once cared for David when he was just a little boy, his nanny, stood outside waiting for Mr. and Mrs. Okonkwo. When the elderly couple stepped out of the car, she placed both hands on her chest, smiled deeply, and walked toward them. "My people," she said softly, tears already in her eyes. Mrs. Okonkwo gasped, then rushed to hug her. "Oh my God, you look so good and healthy. Look at you." Mr. Okonkwo smiled and nodded. "It's been so many years, but your face hasn't changed." The old woman wiped her eyes gently. "All thanks to your son. He found me and gave me a new life. He saved me from pain and suffering." She held their hands tightly and said, "Thank you for raising a kind child. I am a living testimony." That evening, family and friends filled the house. People came with food, drinks, and big smiles. Some helped decorate. Some sang and danced. It was a full house. The next morning, the house was filled with warmth and joy. Inside the house, Amaka's younger siblings, Chidi and Ifeoma, were also present. They had been spending most of their time in David's house since their engagement was announced. As they sat and talked with Mr. and Mrs. Okonkwo, something beautiful happened. David's parents watched quietly as Ifeoma helped serve drinks, and Chidi sat answering questions politely. Then David's mother leaned toward David and whispered, "These children are special, well-mannered, kind, and wise." David smiled. "They grew up without parents, but look at them now." Mr. Okonkwo nodded. "We're proud of them. From this moment on, they are part of this family." Ifeoma overheard those words. Her eyes widened and she blinked fast to stop the tears. For the first time in her life, someone had called her family. A few days later, the wedding day finally arrived. The hall was filled with white flowers, golden ribbons, and beautiful music. The crowd was large. David's friends had flown in from the US. Amaka's neighbors from her old street were also there, eyes wide with wonder. Amaka stood behind the curtain, her heart beating fast. Her dress was simple but lovely. Her brother Chidi held her hand. "Sis," he whispered, "you look like a queen." She smiled, "And you look like a prince." The music changed, the doors opened. She stepped out. David stood by the altar, smiling like the happiest man on earth. When Amaka reached him, he held her hands tight and whispered, "You changed my life." She looked at him and replied with a smile and tears in her eyes, "No, it's you who has changed mine." The pastor smiled at them both. Today is a day of joy, not just for love, but for destiny. They said their vows, they exchanged rings. They were joined as husband and wife. The hall erupted with claps, laughter, and happy tears. Weeks passed, Amaka's papers were processed. She moved with David to the United States. Life was new, life was good. But they never forgot where they came from. David helped Ifeoma set up her dream fashion studio and gave Chidi a scholarship to pursue his engineering course. David paid for everything. One day, Amaka stood on their balcony in Texas holding a cup of tea. David walked up behind her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She looked up at the sky. "I'm thinking about a wallet, a dusty street, and a choice I made." David smiled. "That small choice," he said, "gave me the greatest gift of my life." She turned and hugged him tight, and together they stood there, grateful, peaceful, and full of joy, with Amaka bringing a wealth of experience to her husband's real estate business. They worked together seamlessly, achieving even greater success. This story reminds us that one simple act of kindness can open the door to blessings we never imagined. Amaka had every reason to keep that wallet, but she chose honesty. And that single choice changed her life forever. 2 years after that beautiful wedding in Port Harcourt, the morning sun was shining over a quiet neighborhood in Houston, Texas. Amaka stood in her modern kitchen, pouring a glass of orange juice. She wasn't wearing greasy overalls anymore. Instead, she wore a simple silk dress that felt soft against her skin. But even as she looked out at the green lawn and the swimming pool, her mind often went back to the dusty roadside where she used to spend her days. David walked into the kitchen wearing a sharp suit. He was preparing for a big meeting, but he stopped when he saw Amaka. He walked up to her and kissed her forehead. "You're thinking again," he said with a smile. Amaka laughed softly. "I was just thinking about how life works. One day you are begging a man to teach you how to pat a tire, and the next day you are living in a house with more rooms than people." Life in the United States had been an adjustment, but Amaka did not just sit back as a billionaire's wife. She had joined David's real estate company as a technical consultant. When they were building new houses, Amaka was the one who went to the sites. She understood how machines worked and how structures were built from the ground up. The workers respected her because she wasn't just a boss. She was someone who knew what it felt like to have calluses on her hands. David often told his partners that Amaka was the secret to their recent success because she saw things other people missed. But the real joy in Amaka's heart came from her siblings. Chidi had finished his first year of engineering with top grades. David had made sure he had the best tutors and equipment. Chidi often spent his weekends in the garage, fixing old car engines just for fun, a habit he had picked up from watching his sister work as a vulcanizer. He was no longer the small boy who went to bed hungry. He was a confident young man with a bright future. Ifeoma's success was just as great. With David's support, she had opened a boutique and fashion studio in Port Harcourt, managed by a trusted team while she studied fashion design in the US. Her designs were a mix of traditional Igbo patterns and modern styles. She had even designed the dress Amaka was wearing. Ifeoma often said that she wanted to dress women in a way that made them feel as strong as Amaka had always been. Every month, Amaka and David would have a long video call with the old nanny, Mommy, back in Port Harcourt. The 4-bedroom house David built for her was now a place of life. Mummy had used some of the monthly support David gave her to start a small garden where she grew vegetables and fruits. She didn't sell them for profit. She gave them to the orphans and the poor in her neighborhood. She told Amaka that she wanted to pass on the kindness David had shown her. She was healthy, happy, and no longer knew what it felt like to be afraid of the night. One evening, David and Amaka decided to take a walk around their neighborhood. As they walked, they passed a man whose car had a flat tire by the side of the road. He looked frustrated and was struggling with the jack. Without thinking, Amaka walked over. David stood back, smiling, knowing what was about to happen. "Do you need help?" Amaka asked. The man looked up, surprised to see a beautiful woman in a silk dress offering to help. "I think the jack is stuck," the man said. Amaka bent down, adjusted the position of the jack, and showed him how to leverage the bar properly. Within minutes, the tire was changed. The man was speechless. "How do you know how to do that?" he asked. Amaka wiped her hands on a small cloth David handed her. She looked at David and then back at the man. "I used to be a vulcanizer in Nigeria," she said with pride. "Never forget the skills that kept you alive." As they walked back to their home, David held her hand tightly. "That's why I love you," he said. "You never forget who you are." Amaka leaned her head on his shoulder. "Honesty brought me to you, David. But it was your heart that made me stay." They knew that their story wasn't just about money or luck. It was about the fact that a simple act of returning a wallet had started a chain of goodness that had saved a nanny, educated 2 orphans, and brought 2 souls together from worlds apart. As they entered their home, they were at peace, knowing that as long as they kept their hearts clean and their hands ready to help, their blessings would never end. In a world where people often take advantage of others, may we always choose what is right, even when no one is watching. Because when you give out honesty, kindness, love, it will always find its way back to you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What did this story teach you? Please drop your thoughts in the comment section. I enjoy reading every single one of them. There's another very interesting story coming your way in just a few days. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on your notification bell so you'll be the first to know when it drops. If you enjoyed the story, please hit the like button and share it with your friends.